So sometimes success when you're in your 20s is the worst thing that can happen to you because you have no discipline, you have no perspective, you think it's just going to keep going the way it is, you're not aware of all the dangers out there, you don't have life experience enough to realize how things can turn on you very quickly. If I had been given the chance to write the 48 Laws of Power when I was in my 20s and I had success, it would have ruined me. I probably wouldn't have had success.
Why?
A curse. That's what Robert Greene just called early success. Not a blessing, a curse. And before you write that off as something only famous people need to worry about, I want you to actually sit with this conversation today. Because what we're about to get into is not really about fame or money or record deals. It's about something much bigger than that. It's about why patience is one of the most powerful weapons a person can have. Why the people who take the long road often end up stronger, wealthier, and more whole than the ones who get there fast. And why, if you haven't made it yet, that might not be a failure at all. It might be protection. Today, we're talking about the psychology of men who succeed late in life. And by the end of this, I want you to understand something about your own timeline that might change how you see everything you've been frustrated about. Welcome to the Huxon Network. It's always better to understand than to be understood.
It is a curse to have everything go right on your first attempt.
Yeah, the proverbial one-hit wonders. What happens is, there was a real syndrome in hip hop, and I talked a lot about that with 50, where you come from the hood, and you've never had any kind of money, and then overnight, you've got 6 figures, 7 figures. You've got women like, left, right, and center coming to you. You've got all this power and attention and celebrity, and it goes to your head. And you start partying, and you start thinking, okay, I better put out another album. But you get a little bit conservative now because you want to keep going and you think that you've got a formula for it, right? And then your second album doesn't do nearly as well. But if that first album didn't do well and you were smart about it, it would have taught you a valuable lesson about the music industry. So 50, he did his first album called Power of the Dollar. And I have a kind of a bootleg copy of it he gave me. And it's absolutely it's available now pretty much on the internet. It's absolutely fantastic. But right before it was to be launched, he got shot, and the producers dropped him on the album. They didn't release it, and they dropped him from Columbia Records. It's too dangerous. It was a drug beef, and we can't have this guy touring if there's going to be violence. And so he was thinking, that failure, instead of it had been a big hit, would have gone to his head. Who knows what would have happened to him. Here he was, like, completely back to square zero. In fact, worse, he had nothing. He did all this work, and he had this price on his head, and nobody would come near him. And he wanted to learn what the lesson was from this failure. And it wasn't his fault. Although it sort of was, because he had been a crack dealer, and it was like a previous beef that he hadn't really resolved. So, it was maybe partially his fault. Anyway, he goes, well, the lesson is I can't be dependent on a record label. They're too conservative, they're too cautious. I'm somebody who lives on the edge. My music plays on the fact that I was a crack dealer, that I live dangerously, that I'm the real thing, that I'm not a fake gangster, I'm the real thing, okay? So what am I going to do? I'm not going to put out a record. I'm going to do mixtapes, and I'm going to sell them on the streets of Queens, and then Brooklyn, and then Manhattan. Just these little tapes, these singles. and I'm going to be as violent. His first one that he puts out is called Fuck You. He's saying, fuck you to everybody who ever doubted me. Fuck you who tried to kill me. Fuck you to the record labels, pardon my language, etc. So he learned from that.
I want you to really sit in that. Sit with what just happened in that story. Because on the surface, it sounds like a music industry anecdote. Underneath, it is one of the most important psychological lessons about success that exists. 50 Cent got shot, got dropped from his label, lost everything right before what should have been his big moment. And Greene is telling you that failure protected him. Because if that first album had blown up the way it was supposed to, 50 would have built his entire career on a formula he didn't actually understand yet. Think about what that formula would have required going forward. He'd have to keep writing from the same well, the same stories, the same hunger, the same chapter of his life, recycled over and over. Because that's what made the first one work. And that's the trap nobody talks about. When they glamorize early success, you're not just famous early, you're depleted early. Whatever pool of experience, pain, hunger, and perspective you pulled from to create that first hit, that pool has a bottom. And if you hit the bottom of it while you're still in your early 20s, you've got nothing left to draw from except trying to recreate something you've already outgrown. Later in this clip, Chris Williamson is going to bring up a singer who hit massive success at 17 years old. Listen for that part, because it's the clearest version of this exact trap you'll ever hear. If you've ever wondered how somebody can have everything and still feel completely stuck, keep watching. That part explains it. Now, here's where I want to go even deeper than what Greene is describing, because that depleted well is only half the danger of early success. The other half is what happens to you as a person while you're young, talented, and suddenly valuable to people who have no interest in your well-being. Listen to me carefully here. There are predators everywhere, different types, different methods, but the same goal: to use you to fuel whatever machine they're running. And when you're young and talented, and you don't yet have life experience to read people, you are exactly what they're looking for. Here's something that nobody explains to you when you're coming up. Potential is not something you see in yourself. Potential is something other people see in you. And the moment somebody sees potential in you, they make a calculation. How much value can I extract from this? And that calculation can go two ways. They can use that potential to build something that benefits both of you, or they can drain it for themselves and leave you with nothing but the experience of having been used. The question is never whether somebody sees potential in you. The question is whether you are prepared enough to control what they do with it. So let me ask you something directly, not to be harsh, but because this is the question that determines everything. Are you ready? Not ready in a sense of talent, not ready in a sense of drive, ready in a sense of, do you know what you're walking into? Do you know how the money actually moves in your field? Do you know the language of the contracts you're going to be handed? Do you know how to recognize when someone is building with you versus building off you? Think about it this way. Say you're going into trades. You're an electrician. You know the work. You can wire a building, pass inspection, do the job properly. You know roughly what an electrician earns. But do you know how hourly billing actually gets manipulated? Do you know how late payments get used to redirect money away from you? Do you know the difference between what the budget says and what actually lands in your pocket? Do you know the key terms that separate the people who get paid from the people who get robbed? You know, rob Peter to pay Paul. Do you know that style? While the job is still running, You see, you can be fully skilled and completely unprepared at the same time. And that gap between what you can do and what you understand about how the game is played around what you can do is exactly where people get drained. Greed, envy, gluttony, jealousy. Those aren't just words from an old book. Those are active forces operating on every young person who shows promise. And if you don't know how to recognize them, they will swallow you whole. Look at the actual data on people who find success early. Real fame, real money, while they're still young. A very small percentage come out of it whole. Parents who drain the accounts. Families that fracture over money. People who lose their lives because of the envy that builds around them. When you're young and talented, you are extremely vulnerable. And people want to use you in every way available to them, financially, sexually, as a resource to be drained and discarded. And here's the part that doesn't heal when the money runs out. The way that experience warps your understanding of other human beings follows you. People who got used early often struggle with relationships for the rest of their lives because the lesson they learned wasn't about music or business. It was that people are mostly trying to take something from you. That's a heavy thing to carry into a relationship you have after. Now, I've seen this close up before I had to pivot after COVID. I was an up-and-coming writer and director, and I watch it happen over and over, man. People arriving in LA from other cities, wide-eyed, completely naive, certain they were about to be the next big thing. That's everybody's dream, right? And it's good to hear because everybody has a story. You know, everybody talks about the big name predators, the Weinstein level stories that make headlines. But at the ground floor, it's the gatekeepers, the ones who want a little something extra to open that door. You know, the doublespeak, the flirting, the I know a guy energy. Well, they're really angling for a favor. And I watch people give up pieces of themselves, their values, their boundaries, just to get a small step forward, an extra role, a connection, a foot in the door. Desperation really reveals a lot, man. And that's the cost of arriving somewhere powerful without the experience to protect yourself. The door opens, but you don't yet know what's standing behind it. If you've ever been used by somebody you trusted, somebody who smiled at you while they were already planning their exit with what they took from you, keep watching, because what we get into next explains exactly how that happens and why experience is the only thing that stops it.
He learned not to take success for granted, and he built on that. And so he's not a one-hit wonder. So sometimes success when you're in your 20s is the worst thing that can happen to you because you have no discipline, you have no perspective, you think it's just going to keep going the way it is, you're not aware of all the dangers out there, you don't have life experience enough to realize how things can turn on you very quickly. If I had been given the chance to write the 48 Laws of Power when I was in my 20s and I had success, it would have ruined me. I probably wouldn't have had success.
Why?
Because I wasn't ready for it. Look, Chris, I had had so much failure until I was essentially 39 years old, pushing 40, that I had perspective, that I know what it's like to fail. And so when I had success, it wasn't like, wow, I'm the greatest thing that ever happened. I can just live off this forever. My next book's going to be fantastic. No, I have a little voice in me that says, Robert, you failed so many times, you're probably going to fail again, right? You've seen so many people in Hollywood who started off hot and bombed. I had experience to know that I can't take this for granted. I have to be careful. I have to be strategic. I have to build on it and not let the success go to my head. And it didn't go to my head. When I wrote The Art of Seduction, I was so worried that book would fail. I was certain it was going to fail. I felt that way about every single book I've ever written. You know, I still feel that way. You know, this next book.
Certain.
it's doomed to failure. I better make it the best book of all. So if you can get drunk on your success, and don't get high on your own supply was the phrase that 50 would always say. So, you want to keep your feet on the ground. You want to know that failure is nipping at your buds. That your next podcast, Chris, could be the worst one of your life. You'll say the wrong thing, and suddenly everything will start cratering.
Mm-hmm.
That keeps you on the edge, and you don't take your success for granted.
Yeah,
Greene just told you something most people will never have the self-awareness to say out loud. He was afraid of every single book he ever wrote, even after success, even after proving himself over and over. That fear wasn't weakness. That fear was the thing that kept him sharp. Don't get high on your own supply. That's the line 50 Cent repeated. And it applies to anyone in any field who starts believing their early wins mean they figured out the formula for life. Now I want you to connect this to something bigger, because this whole conversation, succeeding early versus succeeding late, it's really about a much bigger idea. Die rich or die broke. And I know how that sounds when you say it plainly. People hear that and think, so what? You die either way. What's the point? But that's a black and white read on something that isn't black and white at all. The point isn't the money. The point is the legacy. What you're known for. How many lives you touched. Whether the work you did outlived the body that did it. We are here on this earth to produce for each other, to take care of each other, to find our people, our community, and then branch out and touch other lives beyond that circle. If you think you're here by yourself, just to take what you can grab and then check out, you're not living a neutral life. You're actively working against the thing society needs from you. You become a disruptor instead of a contributor. And I've talked about this on this channel before. If you believe there's a purpose laid out for you, there's a balancing force in the world too. Somebody, maybe multiple somebodies, whose role is to pull you off that path. Not because the universe is cruel, because that's how the balance works. Every force that pushes you forward has something pushing back. If you don't have the experience and the awareness to recognize that resistance for what it is, you will mistake it for bad luck, or you'll mistake it for proof that you're not good enough. It's neither. It's friction. And friction is part of every real path worth walking. So let me bring this down to something everybody can picture. Think about online multiplayer games, MMOs, the ones with in-game economies, markets, trading systems. You know what you find in every single one of those games? Swindlers, people trying to con you out of your in-game currency, your real money, your time. It's a microcosm of real life because people are people, no matter what system you put them in. And here's the part that applies directly to what we're talking about. In those games, there are people who want you to win, but only according to how they want you to win. Let me say that over so you understand. But only according to how they want you to win. And if you start succeeding in a way they didn't script, they will throw the whole match. They will force a loss on purpose, not because you're failing, because you're succeeding in a way that doesn't serve their plan for you. There are people in your life doing the exact same thing. People who will try to pull the rug out from everything you've built, not because you're failing, but because you're not succeeding the way they envisioned. You can be doing well and still get sabotaged quietly behind the scenes because your version of winning threatens somebody else's comfort. And here's the part that makes this so difficult to protect against. They're not hiding. They're right in front of you, smiling, shaking your hand, calling you brother. You pray for the blessing. Somebody else is praying harder to intercept it. A man prays for loyal workers to build his business, and then turns around and finds every legal and illegal way to underpay those same workers the moment the business is running. People will rob you while you are wide awake, looking directly at them, and you won't see it happening because you don't yet speak the language of how it's being done. That is not a cynical view of the world. That is just the world. And the people who understand it don't become bitter. They become prepared. There is a difference. If you've ever felt like something invisible was working against you, like you were doing everything right and still losing ground, keep watching, because there's a name for what that is. And once you can name it, you can see it coming before it moves on you again. And most of the time, you won't even see it happening. There's a story, I think about this a lot, about a kid who by all accounts was more talented than Michael Jordan, more gifted, but he never had the support system Jordan had. So now, we only know one name. Let that sink in for a second. Talent alone has never been the deciding factor. Even Jordan, with everything he became, had people around him trying to take advantage, trying to angle for a piece. If a talent like that needed the right people around him to make it all the way, what makes anyone think they can do it completely alone, with no mentorship, no understanding of how people actually operate? This is exactly why experience matters more than speed, why reading people, understanding psychology, recognizing manipulation before it happens, that's not a bonus skill, that's survival equipment. If you've ever wondered why the most talented person in the room didn't make it, while someone less gifted did, keep watching. What we get into in the deep dive explains that gap in a way that's going to change how you see every room you walk into from this point forward.
Very glad when I look back at the period that when we first spoke, up until the second time that we spoke. So it was about episode 78. It was about episode sort of 350, something like that. And that period, if you look at the graph of plays and followers and money, is like that. It's just flat. The graph is just totally flat between the two. There's a little upward tilt. And it's the law of anything which becomes exponential, that as you start to zoom out more, it makes the very beginning look even more paltry. And it's that up to there. But that's only been the last 2 years.
Oh, I see.
2.5 years. It's there.
So, here's what nobody tells you when you're scrolling through somebody else's highlight reel. You don't see the slow fall. You only see the numbers. You don't hear the double speak happening behind the scenes. The people already plotting their exit, already planning how to extract what they can before the whole thing collapses. You're watching a highlight reel and assuming it's a documentary. This is true for every young, successful person you've ever watched online, every content creator, every streamer, every young businessman who looks like he's got it all figured out at 23. You're not seeing the sabotage happening in the group chat you're not in. You're not seeing the contract somebody signed without reading it all the way through. You're not seeing the slow extraction that's already in motion. But with age, you see it. With experience, you see it. With the right information delivered to you at the right time, which is exactly what we try to do on this channel, you start seeing things before they happen. And that, more than talent, more than luck, more than timing, is what actually determines whether someone's success lasts. If you've ever felt like you were one move away from everything clicking, but kept getting knocked back right before the breakthrough, keep watching. Because the reason that keeps happening is not what you think it is. It was never about how fast you get there. It's about whether you can maintain it once you arrive. Because you can be the person everybody's talking about for a whole month. You've seen it. Trendy as hell. You can have the viral moment, the big launch, the moment where everyone in your circle is saying your name. And then what? Nobody thinks about next year. Nobody thinks 5 years down the line. Somebody gets a windfall of money, and instead of investing immediately, they live off the high. They spend like the high is permanent. Nobody builds an exit strategy. Nobody builds independence from the system that gave them the win in the first place. But 50 Cent did, Robert Greene did, and the through line in both of their stories is the same. They understood at some point that they didn't know who was coming to snuff their light. And instead of getting comfortable, they prepared. Now, I want to talk to the people watching this who feel behind, because I know that's a lot of you. I know there's frustration in not having made it yet, not having the relationship you want yet, not having the recognition, the money, the version of life you pictured for yourself by now. Here's what I need you to understand. Your purpose is bigger than any single relationship. It's bigger than any single milestone you haven't hit yet. What the world actually depends on is people fulfilling their purpose. And when people refuse to, when they stay locked into a black and white view of complex situations, everybody loses something, not just you. The people who were supposed to be touched by what you were meant to build. If you keep applying the same flat equation to every complex situation life throws at you, the same reaction, the same approach, no matter what the moment actually requires, you will keep failing in the exact same way. Flexibility isn't optional. It's the entire skill. And if you're someone who feels like they keep arriving at the same wall no matter what direction they approach from, keep watching. Because what comes next is the most important part of this entire conversation. And I want to address something directly, because I see it constantly. People say they have social anxiety, and they let that be the explanation for why they had never approached the opportunity, never made the call, never put themselves in the room. Sometimes that's real, and it deserves compassion and real work. But sometimes, a lot of times, it becomes an excuse not to try, a permission slip to stay stagnant. And if you're using it that way, you already know it. That conversation is between you and yourself. Because here's the truth about people who can't read other people yet, who haven't built the experience to recognize manipulation, who don't know how to navigate a room full of competing interests. You are vulnerable to every single person whose path includes derailing you, the ones with false accusations ready to deploy for a payout, the ones angling for a cut of something they didn't build, the ones who will use your trauma, your fear of disappointing people, your conditioning to never say no. They'll use it against you, specifically because they can see you don't know how to protect yourself yet. And I want to ask you some real questions here, not rhetorical, real questions I want you to sit with. Do you know how to read a contract yourself all the way through before you sign it? Do you know what a non-compete clause actually means for your future? Do you know how royalties get structured in a way that sounds generous and pays out almost nothing? Do you know the difference between being famous in your field and actually building wealth from it? Because there are people on television right now who cannot pay their rent, people with millions of followers who have never seen a check that matched what their visibility was worth. Fame is not the same as financial protection. Recognition is not the same as security. Are you building something, or are you being built into something somebody else owns? That is the question that determines whether your success lasts or gets extracted right from under you. This is not a one-sided story about any group of people doing this to any other group. This is case by case. Predatory behavior doesn't care about category. What it cares about is vulnerability. And the less you understand human behavior, the more vulnerable you are to everyone operating in bad faith around you. So if you haven't made it yet, if you've gotten close, made it to the front door even, and gotten turned away, I want you to release the shame around that timeline. It's not that you're late, it's that you're absorbing at the speed you're absorbing, learning to navigate people, read contracts, get yourself out of compromised situation, build real protection instead of leaning on visibility alone. That takes the time it takes. There are people who become famous and stayed broke the entire time they were famous. You've seen them. People on television shows who self-destruct the moment the cameras turn off because they never built the mental armor to survive what the public actually thinks once the spotlight moves on. And remember, man, progress is progress. All progress is progress towards the goal. One new person who believes in what you're building is more than what you had last week. Momentum compounds, understanding compounds. So never feel behind for not having made it yet. Never feel like it's not your time. The path that worked for somebody else, the person who inspired you, that was their path, not yours. You have to find yours. And that's exactly why we made the video on finding your purpose with Robert Greene. It's free. The only cost is your time, and it puts you directly in line with understanding what your specific path actually looks like instead of trying to copy somebody else's. Now let's bring this all the way home. Why is making it late actually the better outcome? Because you die rich instead of dying broke? And I don't mean that in a shallow, just stack money type way. I mean, you accumulate enough in wisdom, in wealth, in understanding of people that you can actually pass something on. That's how legacy works. There are countless men who built real, lasting wealth later in life, specifically because they took the time to understand business, understand human nature, understand swindlers and hustlers operating around every opportunity. They didn't rush. They built the radar first, because once you can understand people coming before they move, once you have that radar built from real experience, you don't just protect what you've built, you accelerate past everyone who's still operating blind. That's the entire psychology of men who succeed late in life. It was never a delay. It was the build phase. And the men who understand that are the ones who are still standing and still building, long after the ones who got there fast have already burned out. If this conversation hit you today, if you've been carrying frustration about your own timeline, go watch the purpose video. It's linked at the end of this one. And the video on what's coming with AI connects directly to this conversation too, because understanding the system coming for your attention and your resources is part of the same skill set we just spent this whole video talking about. This is the Huxon Network, where it's always better to understand than to be understood. I'll see you in the next one. If this one moves something in you, share it with somebody who feels like they're behind. They're not. And drop a comment. Tell me, what's the thing you've been rushing that actually needs more time? I read every single comment. You guys be blessed. Subscribe, like, and I'll see you in the next one.